"I need your 11 inches, and you need my milk," said the giant widow to the dying rancher. He said no, but she grabbed him anyway. The 6-foot widow towered over the dying rancher, collapsed in his doorway, her shadow blocking his last view of sunset. "I need your 11 acres of water rights, and you need my milk thistle medicine that saved 3 men from the same poison coursing through your veins," Margaret Thornfield declared, her voice cutting through his fever. "No," Jackson Hayes gasped, his pride stronger than his pain. But she grabbed him anyway, lifting his broken body like a child. The dying rancher, who'd survived 3 wars, was now helpless in the arms of the giant widow everyone feared, but no one truly knew. His boots dragged through the dust as she carried him. The smell of death hung on him like smoke from a dying fire, but beneath it she caught something else. Gun oil, fresh. This man was still fighting even as his body surrendered. She'd buried a husband who smelled the same way 3 winters ago. "Put me down," Jack wheezed, but his words held no power. Blood spotted his shirt where the bullet had torn through 2 weeks back. The wound had gone bad. Everyone in Copper Creek knew it. They were already dividing up his land in their minds, like vultures circling a dying calf. But Margaret Thornfield didn't circle. She struck. Inside her wagon she laid him on fresh straw that crackled under his weight. Her horses stood patient in the freezing wind, their breath making ghosts in the air. Jack's eyes rolled back, showing white like a spooked horse, but she slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed off the mountains. "You don't get to die yet," she said. "Not when you're the only thing standing between Samuel Crenshaw and every family in this valley." His eyes snapped open at Grenshaw's name, good, hate, would keep him alive longer than hope. The ride to her. Ranch took forever and no time at all. Jack drifted between this world and the next, mumbling about Emma, about the baby that never drew breath. Margaret knew those ghosts. They lived in her house too, in the empty chair where her husband used to sit, in the silence where laughter used to live. Her ranch hands scattered like leaves when she pulled up. They'd never seen their iron-willed boss carry a man before. She'd carried plenty of things, 100-pound feed sacks, newborn calves, the weight of running 5,000 acres alone. But never a man. Not since the night she'd dragged her husband's body back from the north pasture, 6 bullets in his back, all from the same gun. Grenshaw's gun, though no judge would ever hear it. She kicked open her door and laid Jack on her kitchen table. The same table where she'd tried to save her husband. Failed then. But 3 years of learning from that failure had taught her things. The milk thistle that grew wild by the creek, the way to draw poison from blood, the prayers that sometimes worked and the ones that never did. Jack's breathing sounded like winter wind through a broken window, rattling, stopping, starting again. Why? He managed to ask as she cut away his shirt. The wound underneath was black around the edges, veins spreading from it like roots from a poisoned tree. "Because Crenshaw thinks he's won," she said, heating her knife over the stove flame. "He shot my husband. He shot you. He thinks we're all just cattle to be herded or slaughtered." She pressed the hot blade to his wound. Jack screamed, the sound tearing through the house like it was ripping the walls apart. But he didn't pass out. Tough as boot leather, this one. "Your 11 acres control the water gate," she continued, working steadily. "Without it, my 5,000 acres turned to dust. But more than that, without it, every small rancher depending on that water loses everything. So this is business," Jack said through gritted teeth. Margaret paused, her hands covered in his blood. "My husband died trying to protect those families. You're dying for the same reason. Maybe that makes us fools. Or maybe it makes us the only humans left in a valley full of wolves." She mixed the milk thistle with fresh cream from her prize cow, the one that had won 3 county fairs before the world went dark. The medicine looked like nothing, thin and white as hope itself. But she'd seen it work, watched it pull men back from death's door when the doctor had already started measuring for coffins. "Drink," she commanded. "I'd rather die with dignity than live as your charity case." Jack said, "Dignity." Margaret laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You think there's dignity in letting Crenshaw win? In letting Emma's death mean nothing?" Jack's whole body went rigid at his wife's name. "Don't you dare." "She came to me," Margaret said quietly, 2 years ago, begging for help. when you were too proud to ask. Said you'd rather starve than accept charity from anyone, especially a woman. I gave her food medicine for the baby. She cried in this very kitchen, worried about you, loving you, trying to save you from your own stubborn pride. Tears ran down Jack's face now, mixing with sweat and dirt. She never told me, because she loved you more than you loved your pride. But she's gone now, and I'm all you've got. So you can die here on my table like a stubborn mule, or you can drink this medicine and live long enough to make Crenshaw pay for what he's done." Their eyes met across the table. In that moment, they weren't widow and rancher, not giant and dying. They were two people who'd lost everything to the same man, standing at the edge of the same cliff. Jack drank the medicine. It burned going down, like swallowing lightning. He convulsed, his back arching off the table. Margaret held him down, her strength surprising even herself. This was the fight now, not with guns or laws, but with death itself. Outside, snow began to fall. The first storm of what would be the longest winter Montana had ever known. The medicine worked like firefighting ice in Jack's veins. For 3 days, he burned with fever while Margaret never left his side. She bathed his face with cool water from the creek, whispered stories about the land before Crenshaw came, before the railroad carved scars across the valley like wounds that wouldn't heal. On the 4th day, Jack opened his eyes to find her asleep in the chair beside him, her large frame folded like a question mark, her hand still holding his. Her fingers were rough as tree bark, but gentle as spring rain. He'd never noticed that contradiction before, never noticed a lot of things. "You stayed," he said, his voice cracking like dried leather. She startled awake, and for just a second he saw past the Iron Widow everyone feared. He saw a woman who'd been alone too long, who'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone breathe in the same room, someone whose heartbeat meant the world hadn't ended yet. "You're not dead," she said, like it was an accusation. Disappointed? The opposite. She stood towering over him again, but this time her shadow felt like shelter, not storm. "Crenshaw's men came yesterday, looking for you. I told them you were my new foreman." Jack tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "Nobody will believe that." "They will when we make it legal." She pulled out a paper from her dress pocket. "A business arrangement? You sign your water rights to me. I give you half my land. Together, we become too big for even Crenshaw to swallow." "That's not a business arrangement," Jack said. "That's a marriage contract." The room went quiet as death. Outside, wind rattled the windows like it was trying to get in, trying to hear what would happen next. "Is that such a terrible thing?" Margaret asked, and for the first time since her husband died, her voice shook. "We're both alone, both fighting the same enemy, both pretending we're stronger than we really are." Jack studied her face, the lines around her eyes from squinting into too many sunsets alone, the way her jaw set like she was ready to fight the whole world. But underneath, something else. The same loneliness that woke him at 3 in the morning, reaching for Emma who wasn't there, would never be there again. "I can't love you," he said honestly. "Emma took that part of me to the grave." "I'm not asking for love," Margaret replied. "I'm asking for partnership. For someone to stand with when Crenshaw comes. For someone who won't die on me just when I start to trust again." Before Jack could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside. Lots of them. Margaret grabbed her rifle from above the door, checked it was loaded. Jack forced himself to sit up, the room spinning like a drunk dancer, but he'd face whatever came standing, not lying down. The door exploded open. Snow swirled in like angry ghosts. Dale Morrison stood there, Crenshaw's foreman with 8 men behind him. "All armed, all smiling that smile wolves wear before they tear into sheep." "Well, well," Morrison said, his voice smooth as oil on water. "The dying rancher isn't dying. And the giant widow's got herself a pet." "Get off my land," Margaret said, rifle steady as mountain stone. "Your land." Morrison pulled out a paper. "Mr. Crenshaw holds the note on this ranch. Due today. Pay up or get out." The paper was real. Jack could see it in Margaret's face. The one thing she hadn't told him. She was broke. All those families she'd been feeding through the winter, all that medicine she'd bought, had bled her dry. The ranch was all she had left, and now Crenshaw was taking that too. How much? Jack asked. $8,000. Morrison smiled wider. Cash. It might as well have been $8 million. Nobody had that kind of money. Not in Copper Creek, not anywhere nearby. This was Crenshaw's final move. Take Margaret's land, control the water, own the whole valley, but Jack stood up, using the table to keep from falling. I'll pay it. Everyone turned to stare at him. Even Margaret looked like he'd grown a second head. You, Morrison laughed. You don't have $8, much less 8,000. Jack reached into his boot, the movement nearly dropping him, but he pulled out a leather folder. Inside, papers that looked official as death certificates. My military pension, he said. 20 years of back pay I never collected, plus my shares in the Union Pacific Railroad. My unit was paid in stock for protecting the workers. Worth about $12,000 at last count. The room went silent as a graveyard. Morrison's smile died like a flower in frost. That's not possible, he said. Call the bank, Jack said. They'll confirm it. Morrison looked between Jack and Margaret, calculating. 8 men with guns against 1 giant widow and 1 dying rancher who could barely stand. Easy math, evil math. Or, Morrison said, drawing his pistol, we just kill you both now. Say you attacked us. Nobody will question it. This was it. The moment when everything would end, or everything would change. But Margaret laughed. Not a bitter laugh or a scared laugh. A real laugh, like she'd heard the world's best joke. You think we're alone? She called out, the windows filled with faces. Women's faces. All the homesteader wives Margaret had been teaching to read. But they weren't holding books now. They were holding guns. 20 of them, maybe more, all aimed at Morrison and his men. Funny thing about teaching women to read, Margaret said. Once they can read contracts, they realize how much they've been cheated. Once they can read laws, they know their rights. And once they can read maps, they know exactly where to set up an ambush. Morrison's hand shook now. His men looked like they wanted to run but had nowhere to go. You kill us, Jack said, leaning heavy on Margaret's shoulder, and you'll never make it out of this valley alive. Every one of these women lost someone to Crenshaw. Husbands, sons, brothers, they've got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. But we're civilized people, Margaret added. So here's the deal. You leave now. Tell Crenshaw the debt is paid and nobody dies today. Or you can try your luck against 20 angry widows who've been practicing their shooting all winter. One of the women, young Constance Garrett, cocked her rifle loud as thunder. My husband died slow from a Crenshaw bullet, she said. I wouldn't mind returning the favor. Morrison holstered his pistol. His men lowered their guns. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is, Jack said, and pulled out one more paper from his folder. Telegraph from the governor. Seems he's very interested in Crenshaw's land grabbing. Federal marshals are already on their way. You boys might want to be gone when they get here. Morrison and his men backed out slowly, mounted their horses, and rode hard into the storm. The women stayed at their posts until the hoofbeats faded to nothing. Then something beautiful happened. The women came inside, filling Margaret's empty house with laughter and tears and stories. They hugged her, hugged Jack, hugged each other. For the first time in 3 years, the house felt alive again. As the women celebrated, Jack pulled Margaret aside. You saved my life, he said. You saved my ranch, she replied. No, Jack said, looking at the women filling her home with light. We saved each other. And maybe, if you're still offering that partnership... Margaret looked down at him. She'd always be taller, always be stronger in some ways. But he looked up at her like she was the sunrise after the longest night of his life. I'm not Emma, she said quietly. And I'm not your husband, Jack replied. But maybe that's okay. Maybe 2 broken people can make something whole. Not perfect, but whole. Margaret held out the marriage contract again. This time Jack signed it without hesitation. Outside, the storm was ending. Sun broke through the clouds like hope itself, turning the snow to diamonds, turning the world new again. Crenshaw would come back, probably with more men, definitely with more threats. But he'd find something different now. Not just a widow and a rancher, but a community. Not just individuals trying to survive, but people who'd learned that together. They were stronger than any storm. Jack looked at Margaret, really looked at her. 6 feet tall, yes, but the way she bent down to help others made her seem just the right size. Hands that could shoot a rifle or tend a wound with equal skill. Eyes that had seen too much sadness, but still found room for hope. "You're 11 inches of water rights," she said with a small smile. "I still need them, and your milk thistle medicine," he replied. "Seems I'll be needing it for a while yet." They shook hands like business partners. Then, surprising them both, they held on a little longer than necessary. Not love, not yet, maybe never, but something. Something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. The giant widow and the dying rancher who didn't die after all. Two people who'd lost everything and found that maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't what they'd thought it was. Maybe everything was just beginning. 6 months later, the trial that would decide everything began in a courtroom that smelled like fear and old wood. Samuel Crenshaw sat there in his expensive suit, looking like he owned the world. Maybe he did. He'd bought the judge, everyone knew it. Bought half the jury, too. Money talks louder than justice in frontier towns. Jack could barely walk into that courtroom. The poison had taken its toll. His left leg dragged like it was made of stone. But Margaret was there, her hands steady on his arm, holding him up without making it look like help. She'd learned that about him. How to save his pride while saving his life, Your Honor, Crenshaw's lawyer said, smooth as snake oil. These people have no proof of any wrongdoing. They're just bitter ranchers who can't accept that Mr. Crenshaw is a better businessman. The judge nodded like a puppet on strings. This was going exactly how Crenshaw planned. But then little Constance Garrett stood up in the back row. "I have something to say." The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, woman. You're not a witness." "No," Constance said, "but my dead husband is." She pulled out a leather journal, water-stained with her husband's blood. He wrote everything down. Every threat, every bribe, every murder Crenshaw ordered, including his own, the night before it happened. The courtroom exploded like dynamite. Crenshaw jumped up, his face red as fresh blood. "That's a lie!" "That journal's fake, is it?" Margaret stood now, all 6 feet of her commanding the room. "Then you won't mind if we compare the handwriting to the contracts you had him sign?" More women stood up, each holding papers, journals, letters. Evidence their husbands left behind, knowing they might die, wanting the truth to survive even if they didn't. "This is irregular," the judge shouted, but his voice cracked. Even bought judges get scared when the whole town turns against them. Jack forced himself to stand without Margaret's help. His legs shook like leaves in a storm, but his voice was steady as iron. "Your Honor, I move that this case be transferred to federal court. The marshals are already here." The doors opened. 5 federal marshals walked in, their badges catching the light like little suns. The judge's puppet strings got cut real quick. Crenshaw pulled a gun. Of course he did. Men like him always think violence is the answer when money fails. He aimed it at Jack, then Margaret, then back to Jack, like he couldn't decide who he hated more. "You ruined everything," he screamed. "This valley was mine. The water, the land, all of it. You were supposed to die. Both of you were supposed to die." "We did die," Margaret said quietly, stepping in front of Jack. "The people we were died when you killed our families. But something else was born. Something you can't kill with bullets or buy with money. What's that?" Crenshaw snarled, his gun hand shaking. "Community," said 20 voices at once. All the women in that courtroom, speaking as one. Family, love, the things that matter when everything else is gone. Crenshaw pulled the trigger. The gun clicked empty. Morrison had unloaded it. He stood behind his boss, shaking his head. "It's over, Mr. Crenshaw. I won't hang for you. Not for any amount of money." The marshals arrested Crenshaw right there, dragging him out while he screamed about owning them all, about coming back, about revenge. But his words were just noise now, empty as his gun, powerless as all bullies become when people stand together. The judge fled. Half the jury too. But it didn't matter. Justice had been served without them. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling again. But this time it felt different. Clean, new, like the world was washing itself white. Starting over, Jack collapsed on the courthouse steps, his legs finally giving out. Margaret caught him, like she always did now. like she always would. "We won," he said, looking up at her. "No," she said, and for a moment his heart stopped. Then she smiled, that rare smile that made her whole face light up like Christmas morning. "We didn't just win. We survived. Both of us, together." The women gathered around them, all these widows who'd found their voices, their strength, their power. Constance Garrett started singing a hymn, and soon they all joined in, their voices rising into the snowy sky like prayers made of music. Jack reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, a simple gold ring. Nothing fancy. He'd made it himself, from a nugget he'd found in the creek on Margaret's land. "Their land now. I know I said I couldn't love again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But turns out I was wrong. I don't love you like I loved Emma. I love you like a man who's died and been reborn loves the person who brought him back to life. Different, maybe stronger. Definitely real." Margaret looked at that ring like it was the most precious thing in the world. Not because it was gold, but because it was hope shaped into a circle, never ending, always continuing. "I'm still taller than you," she said, tears running down her face. "I'm still broken from the poison," he replied. "I still wake up crying sometimes. I still can't walk without pain." "Then I guess we're perfect for each other," Margaret said, and let him slide that ring onto her finger right there on the courthouse steps, in front of God and everyone. The women cheered. Even Morrison, being led away in chains, managed a small smile. But the best part came next. A wagon rolled up, and out jumped a dozen children, orphans from the settlements Crenshaw had destroyed. Margaret had been hiding them, feeding them, teaching them, giving them hope. They ran to her, calling her Mama Margaret, hugging her giant frame like she was the whole world. And maybe she was. Their world, anyway. One little boy, couldn't have been more than 5, tugged on Jack's coat. "Are you our papa now?" Jack looked at Margaret, then at all those children who needed what he and Margaret had found, a second chance at family. "I suppose I am," he said, and the boy jumped into his arms, standing there in the snow, surrounded by widows who'd become warriors, orphans who'd become family. Jack and Margaret held each other and all those children. The giant widow and the rancher who'd almost died had built something Crenshaw could never destroy. They'd built a home, not just a house or a ranch, but a real home, where broken people could become whole again. The sun broke through the clouds one more time, painting everything gold. The 11 inches of water rights that started it all didn't matter anymore. The milk thistle medicine was just a memory. What mattered was this. 2 people who'd lost everything finding that everything wasn't what they'd thought. Everything was each other. Everything was the choice to grab hold when letting go would be easier. Everything was saying yes to life when death had seemed like the only option. Margaret looked down at Jack. He looked up at her. And for the first time since their first loves died, they were truly, completely, absolutely alive. Tell us where you're watching from, because somewhere in your town, your city, your country, there's someone who needs to know that even giants get lonely. Even the dying can live again. And sometimes the greatest love stories begin with 2 broken people deciding to heal together.